Ratios. So remember, our essential question for this entire unit is going to be how do you use equivalent rates in the real world? So this is when we're going to really start getting into that. So our vocabulary numerator is the number above the line in a fraction or the top number. I'm always going to say numerator and denominator. So you're going to need to make sure that you know which one I'm talking about, whether it's above or below the line in a fraction or the bottom number. A ratio is the comparison of two numbers by division. And this is important to remember that you can divide or anything that is a fraction. That fraction bar is a division sign. So that's going to be something that's really important for you to remember. So the example that we could do for a comparison is boys to girls in the room. And I actually looked at our math attendance, and there are 13 boys and 13 girls in the advanced math class. So you can write it as 13 to 13, or 13 with a colon 13, or you can write it as a fraction, which in this case, it would actually be 1 to 1. So for every one boy, there is one girl, or for every one girl, there is one boy. So simplest form is a problem that cannot be broken down any smaller. So that's going to be important to know is, can I reduce or can I make my fraction any smaller? Because a ratio we want to have in simplest form. We always want to make sure that we have that in simplest form. So if we take a look at a few examples here, 4 to 6, if it helps me, I can write it as a fraction, and then I can reduce it or figure out what can I do to make it smaller. Well, if I divide both at top and bottom by 2, I end up with 2/3. So it would be 2 to 3. This one I'm not going to write as a fraction because 5 and 25, I know they go into each other. And so if I divided it by 5, I would get 1, and then that dot is a colon, but I would say 1 to 5. And then my 8/10 is already written as a fraction, so if I divided it by 2, I would end up with 4/5. So it's important to know that when writing a ratio, the item listed first in the comparison is the numerator. And the is the first number in the ratio, and the numerator in the fraction. Sorry, my apologies. When writing a ratio, the item listed last in the comparison is the second number in the ratio and the denominator of the fraction. And so it will make more sense when we come down here and take a look at our practice problems, but this is probably the hardest part, or what is going to end up getting problems wrong for many of you, because you're going to read it, and sometimes if you have a table of numbers, they may have like eggs and bacon. They may have like 3 eggs and 10 strips of bacon. Well, they may ask you, what is the ratio of bacon to eggs? Well, even though the 10 is larger than 3, that would have to go first. So you are going to get a fraction like that, and that's called an improper fraction. but we'll talk about that more later. So it does make sense or make a difference which number goes first for the correct answer to a problem. So ratio of students wearing glasses to the total number of students, list all three ways. So when I say all three ways, I'm talking about these right here, using the word to, using a colon, and a fraction. All right, so that is something to know, that you can write it any way that you want, whichever you're most comfortable with. So given the ratio of students wearing glasses, I'll just make up, let's say that there were 15 wearing glasses. Our eyesight is really, really bad, of 24 students. Okay, or 15 to 24. Put it like that. So now it's a ratio. Is your ratio in simplest form? If not, write it in simplest form. If it is, how do you know? I'm going to write it as a fraction. So that's the easiest way to reduce. And I'm trying to think, 3 goes into both of those numbers. So we would reduce to 5/8. So that is my ratio in simplest form, 5/8. And then if it was already in simplest form, how do you know? You would say something like the ratio cannot be broken down any smaller. And that would be how you could tell somebody that my ratio is in simplest form, or there's nothing I can use to divide and reduce my ratio or make it any smaller. So the last part is sometimes you're going to be asked to explain what this ratio means. Well, so we had 5/8 or 5/8. Okay, so those are my three ways that I would use to write my ratio. I would say for every 5 students wearing glasses, there are 8 students in the class. I do ask you to do a few explaining problems on your assignment. You can use this wording here to help you if you would like. You can basically set every explanation up the same. You're just numbers, and a few of the words are just going to change. So this is your note sheet on ratios, which is comparing two numbers with division.